Good evening, everyone from Trinity-Pawling School, and welcome to another edition of Pride Perspectives, a conversation with our community. We've had a wonderful series of conversations throughout the month of May and June, and we are happy to continue that as we move into the summer. And tonight we're happy to have Mr. Mead, Mr. Harff from our college office to explain a little bit of our college process, what's in store as we move forward. And also we realize that many of you on this call have students of different ages. And so we have students that will be enrolling here as postgraduates. So this college conversation is very much on the minds of these families, but we also have some younger families as well. So it'll be a nice conversation that entails many different topics, but hopefully will be of good interest to you over the next hour. I'm JP Burlington, Director of Admission at Trinity-Pawling School and also a member of the class of 1995. And we have two fantastic people here joining us tonight and folks on the call. So as with the webinar, you'll see that there's probably a Q&A button on your screen. Please do not hesitate to ask a question throughout the evening. We do have a series of questions that came in when families registered, so we're going to get to those first, but then we'll be working with you throughout the night to answer the questions that are coming. And Mr. Mead, we're going to, you call it the elephant in the room. So I'm gonna go with that, and we have a question that came in, and basically it's simple. How will the COVID-19 global pandemic affect college admissions this coming year?
Well, I'm glad we're starting with the simple question,
yes.
JP. Thank you for putting this together. And for those of you who I have not met, my name is Slade Mead, and this will be my 11th or 12th year at Trinity-Pawling. Working in the college office along with Mr. Harf. That's actually a fantastic question. And I'm going to ask a favor, JP, cut me off if I just get going, because it's such, it is the elephant. It's the elephant in the room. The COVID situation, the pandemic is going to affect the class of 2021. That is for sure. And what I'd like to do is explain it, and it's going to get a little depressing. I'm giving you a leader. It's going to be a little depressing. But I'm then going to shift gears and show how we're going to be proactive and turn many of the negatives into positives. And I think, quite frankly, we've got we'll be okay. We'll do fine. And we're going to manage this COVID problem in a very constructive way. But let me explain why there's some problems. The first problem is a lot of this year's senior class, 2020, have decided to take what's called a gap year. They basically don't want to go off to college and be taking classes by Zoom. So what they've done is they've deferred their admissions for a year, and in essence, they've taken a spot that would normally go to a kid from 2021. They're going to be freshmen when our rising seniors will also be freshmen. There's been a huge number of gap year requests. This is a big problem for colleges this September, but it's going to be a problem for the class of 2021 because there are going to be fewer spots because of these gap kids. The second thing, and I'm sure you guys, unless you're living in a cave, you've probably noticed that a lot of colleges are going test optional. They are not requiring SATs and ACTs. As a result, the application numbers are going to be higher at schools that used to require test scores. You're going to get kids who in the past would have said, oh, there's no way I'll get into Haverford because I don't have the test scores. Well, it doesn't matter next year. They're test optional. So that hurts us because the pool's going to be bigger. There's also the problem or a challenge. I like challenge because we're going to beat this whole thing. There's a challenge that college reps are not going to be making those fall pilgrimages out to schools. And that's actually been one of our greatest strengths, because for openers, our kids have coats and ties. That makes an impact when you meet a college rep after they've come from a grubby school where the kids are like, dressed in t-shirts and ripped blue jeans. They come to our school, it's like, oh my God, this is like civilization. So we've lost that advantage, sort of. And here's where I think where we're going to have a very aggressive plan that's going to make our 2021 kids quite attractive out there in the college process. Number one, yes, it's true the reps cannot visit us physically at 700 Route 22, but we are going to utilize a lot of virtual visits with the reps. And I would argue that if done properly, that's actually better than a visit, because when they come with a visit, there's 5, 6, 7, 8 of you. What we're going to do is try to carve out individual virtual visits, so it's one-on-one, and you're wearing the coat and tie, and they just got off the phone call with some grubby kid wearing his t-shirt. So I think we'll be actually in a fine place with the college reps. The second thing is Mr. Harf and I have a lot of history and relationships with a lot of colleges. In fact, some of you may know that I was not planning to be back this year. I was retiring. I decided to stay for the extra year for the sole purpose of, you need these relationships now more than ever. Putting a new person in my position, yes, Mr. Harf will do fine, but he would be like a goaltender during a power play. Now, I'm sort of patting myself on the head, but I do bring my 12 years of relationships back to the table. And that will come into play. And that's why I decided to stay when Bill Taylor and I started discussing this, and Mr. Harf and I started discussing this. The other thing is it's test optional. You can still take the tests. And schools are canceling SATs and ACTs left and right. The ACT next Saturday, Taft just canceled their test today. We're moving forward. We're doing the social distancing. We're working with the county, making sure we're doing it properly. But we are going to be an ACT and an SAT test center and a TOEFL center all fall. We're not retreating. In fact, we're gaining, because we're picking up the July ACT. In fact, I think it seems like right now we're the only school in the United States that's doing the July ACT, as far as I can tell. But we're also picking up the September SAT. And as you guys probably are aware, if you go onto the SAT website, you will not see us listed. And the reason I'm doing that is we have a very limited number of seats. So what we're doing is I'm asking kids to register at other schools and then send me their registration information, and then I switch them for free into our site. So basically we're closed to the rest of the world right now. Is it legal? Yes. Is it ethical? You could argue that it's not really fair to the other kids, but I work for the Trinity-Pawling kids. I'll take a bullet for those guys. So that's what we're doing. And then I think the fourth very positive thing, and actually I think it'd be better if Mr. Harf were to take this, but we do have the practicum, and I think it's worth paying attention, parents who aren't really used to our system. The practicum gives us an inside advantage in the process. So I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Scott Harf.
Thank you, Slade. Thank you. So for those of you who I haven't met, I'm Scott Harf. I worked with Slade now. This will be my 4th year working with him, 6 years at Trinity-Pawling. And then in addition to working in the college office, I also teach an economics course, coach hockey, coach lacrosse, and live in the dorms. I think that what Slade talked about with the test optional route that all these schools are taking, what they're losing if you're a student who's opting not to submit your test, they're losing a point of information on each application. And so what we need to do as college counselors is figure out what point of information can we add to each of our students' profiles as they're sending these into various colleges. And Slade already mentioned it, but the Practicum for Civic Leadership, which is now will be in its 6th year at Trinity-Pawling, is a 3-part practicum that all of our students are going to go through at some point, whether you're coming in as a freshman and you're with us for 4 years. If you're a repeat junior, you're going to go through it. And then even the PGs are going to go through it very robustly. So it starts out, I know we have some juniors on here, so excuse me, some sophomores on here. So there is a winter project part, which is an interdisciplinary project that students would do with 2 teachers and a cohort of students. So you're having a math teacher combined with a science teacher. You're having history teachers work with language teachers. When I was only teaching, I worked with one of our Spanish teachers to do a winter project where the students investigated the economic impact of the cocaine trade on Latin American countries. So you have the economic and social science piece of it, and then you also have what the cultural impact of it on Latin American countries was there. So that's what our freshmen and our sophomores are doing, and that's kind of the stepping stone into what you're going to be doing as a junior and a senior. So if you're coming in as a junior and as a postgraduate, because the next step is actually a full-on graduation requirement, it'll be our Global Collaborative Challenge. So that's run out of our college office. Mr. Mead and I work with around 10 other faculty members. We create these, we sit down, it's one of my favorite days of the year. We sit down in December and come up with all of these, I like to call them questions that all of the supposedly smartest adults in the world can't figure out. So last year we had questions like, solve the issue of declining voter turnout in the United States. Every year we've done a question that involves plastic recycling. So something along the lines of last year's question was, how would you solve the problem of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch? So there's these overarching, global, again, interdisciplinary questions. The juniors and PGs are broken up into random groups of 5 to 6 students. So you might be working with a guy, even though you've been on campus, even as a 4-year student, you've been on campus for 2 years already. You're going to work with a new PG, maybe. You're going to work with a new junior who transferred in. Maybe you're working with a guy that's been, in classes with you, but you haven't gotten to know well. You'll work all the way through the winter term on that. You're going to get every group will do 2 rough draft presentations. And then their final presentation is to a panel of faculty members. The goal is that you answer your question in 12 minutes. You have to use some sort of multimedia presentation. Most guys are going to use PowerPoints, but you're open to anything. So you're getting presentation skills, you're getting collaboration, you're getting creativity, and you're grappling with, as I said, these real world problems that the adults out there have yet to solve. That then segues into your senior independent project, which is really the capstone of this entire practicum. So again, GCC is a graduation requirement. The SIP also is a graduation requirement. SIP is Senior Independent Project. The Senior Independent Project is just another term for a passion project. So each junior, during the spring of their junior year, the PGs coming in will work with me and Mr. Mead in the summer, starting to identify this, and then really when they begin school in September, we'll start it in earnest. But students are identifying a passion and then creating some sort of product or experience surrounding that passion. They have the opportunity to work with alumni mentors. They have the opportunity to work with faculty members who are experts in their field. But when I'm talking with families and students about it, I think the easiest way to understand it is every student, by the time they get to their 4th or 5th year in high school, has had a pretty similar background in math, science, history. The Senior Independent Project is the first time you're able to leave the traditional curriculum and move out into some sort of, it can be hobby-based, it can be career-based, where it could be just something you haven't, if you haven't gotten to do any computer science stuff in school before and you didn't have room for it in your schedule, this is a great opportunity to do that. What we really love about both the Senior Independent Project and the Global Collaborative Challenge, and this all ties back into what Slade was talking about, is you need this point of information again about what type of student you are when you're going through this college process, especially if you're missing that SAT and the ACT because you're going test optional. These are now your points of information, and they're much more robust than just a 1300 on the SAT. It's now, have you showcased independence truly? Can you talk about that? Can you share that with the admissions committee? Talk about a creative idea that you came up with in the GCC. Talk about a creative idea you came up with for your Senior Independent Project, and then how you're able to carry that on into a real world, honest to God, a project and an actual product that you have out there. It might be, we've had students come up with marketable products that alumni have said, if you came into me as an investor, I'd give you money for this. So they're fantastic, again, points of information for us to use as a college office and for the students to use to showcase who our students are in the admissions process. So, do you have anything to add?
Can I add just a couple of things that the Senior Independent Projects, we've also had examples of, how do I say this tactfully? I'm not shy about sending this information to the colleges of what you're doing. So for instance, we had a young man a few years ago who, for his SIP, decided to be part of, take a role in a short little 5-minute movie made by another student who was doing his SIP. So the guy who wrote the movie was doing his project, and the guy acting in the movie did his. The movie was good. It was 5 minutes. It was written by Hunter Olstein, and Ira Conklin acted in it. Well, we sent the film to Hobart, and Hobart responded with a $68,000 scholarship for acting. These things are amazing. These SIPs are ways that we can get to a college counselor and have them remember who you are after they've read 2,500 files. Oh, you're the actor kid who sent in the movie. Oh, you're the kid from Germany who's writing all this music. Thank you for the CD. We use this material actively to sell our students. And I don't want students to think the SIP is a waste of time, or it's fantastic. It's cannon fodder for our office.
I would also add, Slade, that we've had several students who, when they bought into the SIP, have truly developed new passions. So yeah. You have students who come in who may, their goal, and it doesn't have to change, but their goal may be to play Division I or play Division III sports. And through the Senior Independent Project, they developed this passion for something that maybe they'd given up when they were younger, or they've discovered in their time here at Trinity-Pawling. And whether or not they're continuing through that college recruiting process, being able to show that passion, being able to show their growth, being able to write about it in their college essays and on their college applications, that's the marketability piece that all of a sudden, it almost doesn't matter if you have an SAT or an ACT score.
Yeah. JP, if I could, to the elephant issue, because I mentioned quickly about relationships and the fact that Scott and I have some very good relationships out there with colleges. I didn't really finish that thought. Why is that so important? And this is the good news. As much as some of our parents and kids may be panicking, the colleges are panicking as well, because they aren't doing things the traditional way. And what that means is they need to reach out to the Scott Harfs and the Slade Meads and ask for help, and they're doing that. We are seeing colleges opening up to us like we've never seen before, because class of 2021, you are the lifeblood of the colleges moving forward. And in a way, Scott and I are sort of the facilitators or the gatekeepers, and usually they can bypass us with a college fair or come visit us on our campus. Can't do that anymore, or at least for this coming year. And as a result, the relationship has shifted, and I think for selfishly a very positive way for us. They need us much, much more than they ever have in the past. And that's where the relationships come in extremely importantly to help the colleges through a process where they don't really know what they're doing right now.
Right. So it's almost an unknown for them as well.
It isn't almost.
Completely.
It is.
There you go.
It is. They're panicked.
So just one more on the SAT, ACT. So just a confirmation. A student does not have to submit the score if he takes it. But if it's a good score, is that a benefit in the process?
Yeah, yes, it is. If it's a good score, it's a benefit. And oftentimes financial aid can be linked to a test score. So there are reasons you do want to submit a good test score.
So if a family is, say, spending money this summer on tutoring, there's no reason to stop that because we are going to be hosting those tests. And if they do well on those tests, it's a good thing to submit.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the flip side is true. If they don't do that well on the tests, well, you probably picked the best year ever to not do well on those tests.
Right.
Yeah. And I hear, some kids, oh, Jimmy's a bad test taker. Okay. Good for Jimmy. You picked the pandemic. You won the pandemic sweepstakes. You don't need your test this year. But if you can lay up a nice score, by all means, do it.
Okay.
I believe it or not, I think this is a positive, not a negative.
Sure. As a terrible test taker, I wish this had been my year.
Yeah, but it's funny because there's a lot of angst and panic and people are nervous and what's going to happen. It's going to work to our advantage.
And Scott, there's a combo question here that I'd like to ask, and it's a combination of recruiting and how maybe the two of you work with our coaches, and also the relationship that our coaches have with college coaches, but also in terms of these test scores. If you are a Division I athlete, you must submit a test score. If you are a Division III athlete, I don't think you do. But
yes. The Division I, every Division I and Division II player has to submit a test. Anyone on this call will. The guys and girls who are heading to college this fall, there was a waiver for that because of the COVID-19 situation. As of right now, the NCAA is still going to require people entering in the fall of 2021 to submit a test score. And there's a sliding scale based on what your GPA is through 16 different courses you take. That's very nitty-gritty details. If you have questions about, absolutely, please send me an email. Is our contact information going to be on here after, JP?
No, but right to the college office, college counseling on the website, I will point them to.
Perfect. If you have questions about your 16 NCAA courses, specifically about what test score you would need to submit to the NCAA to be eligible, it's going to be different for Division I or Division II athletes. Send me an email and I'm happy to help with that. In terms of sending to colleges, the Division I and Division II schools, their NCAA eligibility portion of their athletic department is going to require that they have a test score on file, even if they're a test optional institution. So if you're applying to a test optional institution, that would just go through the coaches. It wouldn't go through the admissions committee.
Okay.
For the Division III is a little bit weird. I'm going to use Middlebury as an example. Middlebury's test optional. Middlebury, they just changed this, but they used to require that their athletes still submitted test scores if they were recruited athletes, so to speak. So JP, if you're a great squash player and I'm the squash coach and I want to tip you through admissions at Middlebury, yes, you would need to submit a test score. The coaches at those programs are going to have different kind of levels of test scores that they'll need. So they'll have a certain number that they'll need that are called A bands. They'll have a certain number of B bands and C bands. But you will need a test score to qualify in those bands. And that's going to be very school to school. The NCAA doesn't oversee Division III sports in terms of their academic eligibility as much as they're going to oversee Division I and Division II. But if you have specific questions, definitely reach out to me.
Okay. And then how about just the recruiting aspect with our coaches, your office, and then the colleges?
Yeah, so we generally split up the office so that I'm working mostly with the athletes. Slade definitely has some baseball players and some wrestlers that he works with because he works closely with those programs in some coaching roles. I always talk with parents and kids about when we're in the college office, especially when we're building that college list, we're building the college list just as your average kid, where do you want to go to school? 90% of the time, that list is going to have a lot of overlap with your schools that you would play, let's say, lacrosse at. So we're kind of building two lists simultaneously with a great deal of overlap. Every one of our athletes who's playing, who's heading off to play Division I, Division II, Division III sports, you're still going through the same exact college process as a kid who has no interest in playing sports. So if you come in as a junior, we're going to kick off. We can talk about this more in detail later, but we have our junior parents college day in December every year. That's really the official kickoff of Slade and I working with the juniors. When we come back from Christmas break every year, we'll start in earnest building that first college list. We'll talk about, are you an ACT? Are you an SAT guy? So everyone's going through that. The meetings are continuing as you're doing college visits. You're doing, this spring we were meeting with guys as they did some virtual college tours, did some virtual visits. So everyone's building that college list together. The coaches really come in at different points in time just because every football is going to be much different than lacrosse is, and hockey and basketball, just in terms of when the actual recruiting is for each class. So our coaches are amazing in terms of having fantastic connections with college coaches and getting those coaches for football. That's a very personal recruiting process. Nick Fontaine does an amazing job of getting those coaches on campus. It's once football season ends in November, December there's 4, 5, 6 Division I, Division II, Division III coaches on campus every single day, meeting with the seniors who are then being recruited. Coach Ricaldi, Coach Cass, and Coach Ferraris with hockey, lacrosse, basketball. Those are much more film-based, much more relationship-based. They all have amazing connections at the college level that they're leveraging. They're on the phone day in and day out, making sure that our seniors and our juniors as they're entering that are getting the exposure that they need. We also have sports recruits available to any of our athletes. Football and basketball, I'd say, use it the most. It's, for lack of a better term, it's like a LinkedIn for an athlete. So you can put your GPA, you can put your test scores up there, you can link it to your huddle. And it actually allows you as a student to contact any college coach that you want in the country in your sport directly. So you don't have to go fishing through, if you're an offensive tackle, you don't have to go down to the University of Auburn and find out who the offensive tackle coach is. You just send your stuff through sports recruits. So our football and basketball teams love it. And the coaches also can contact and facilitate contact through that. So it's a long-winded answer to our coaches are incredibly involved. And they're also very involved with making sure that colleges that they're marketing our students to also align with, are they going to be successful there as students? So coming to me and coming to Slade and saying, Johnny's looking at University of Pennsylvania, is he going to be able to handle it there academically? Johnny's getting a lot of interest from these small Division III schools in the Northeast. Is that what he wants to do? And if it's not, and there was a hockey player a few years ago who was generating a ton of interest Division III schools, but all of our conversations in the college office, again, were, I want to be at a big football school in the Midwest. Well, that quickly pivoted, and I think he ended up at Iowa State. But he's loving life, and it's club hockey for him. But the club hockey connection was also made by Coach Ferrara. So our coaches are very, very involved, and it's a personal process for each kid, both on our end and on the athletic end.
And I would say, Slade, if you could chime in, I mean, it's not just this.
I want to piggyback on that, because I would argue that the theater does a very good job reaching out. Like this year's or this past year's head prefect is headed to Vassar, which has one of the best theater programs in the country. And the introduction was made by Kent Burnham, our theater teacher. Literally took him over to Vassar for a day, and made that introduction much like a athletic coach. You also see it in the art world. We've got some students who are headed to some very good art schools from this senior class, and the portfolios that were put together with the art department, Joe Poon has done a great job, has been helpful. We've seen it in the music department. Chris Kelsey has been fantastic, getting the word out, and Mark Templeton getting the word out to schools with kids who have fantastic music aptitudes, such as Sam Fetchner going to Oberlin. So, I know Scott's into this. You do the lion's share of the athletes, which is great, but the same is happening for the non-athletic Trinity-Pawling student.
Right.
If there's a passion, let's sell it.
Right. Great.
So fired up.
Yeah. So I'm just going to go back to a test score question. Are the test score ranges needed for the same top colleges going to be lower? Do you think that's a trend, that test scores are going to be looked at differently because of this? Or do you think the top tier are going to expect the same test scores that they normally expect?
Can I take that one, Scott?
Yeah.
It's a very interesting question. I think that the schools are going to be looking for similar test scores that they've seen in the past. Personally, if you go test optional to, I think what Columbia is going test optional next year, you better have one heck of a transcript to make up for not submitting SAT scores, or ACT scores. And if you do have SAT or ACT scores for Columbia, they're still going to have to be pretty strong. I don't think there's going to be a big erosion in what schools are looking for. And one of the things that Scott and I have to do with the kids, because this is a first time process for the kids, they come to me and they'll say, is my 1150 a good score for Pepperdine? Great question. Well, we'll pick up the phone and we'll ask Pepperdine. They'll tell us. Our rep will tell us. And that goes to the relationship. So I'm constantly telling kids, hey, look, I know you like your score, but at that school, it's going to hurt you. It's not going to help you. Go test optional. The other strategy that I think is going to be really in play next year, and we do this anyway when we don't have pandemics to worry about, but I think with the pandemic, we're going to have to double down. I am going to really push early decision. If you fall in love with a school, fall in love and go early decision. And the reason is, I think early decision applications are going to be weighed down because kids haven't visited the schools. So there's kind of this logic that the herd is going to avoid early decisions because, oh, I haven't really looked under the hood at X. You know, if X is if it feels right and the vibe is right, go early decision. Let's take advantage of the herd avoiding it. And I think schools are going to snatch a lot more on the early decisions because there's so much uncertainty with what's going on in the world. They love early decision. And next year, I perceive they're going to really love early decision. So Scott and I have not rehearsed this question, and so I'm glad to see he's nodding in agreement. But that kind of goes to your previous question about, you know, will they be expecting better test scores? I think they won't be expecting better test scores. They're going to be expecting the same level. But I think there's an opportunity for us to strike and take some of those spots with ED decisions. Early
especially with a school like Slade, you referenced Columbia, or Cornell's another one off the top of my head that's doing this for this year for the first time. So they have no, like, I'm thinking of a school like BC last year went early decision for the first time, and it was this kind of unknown, and they over enrolled a little bit in early decision. So I'm circling back to what you're saying about early decision and then combining it with a lot of these schools, especially the more elite schools, going test optional for the first time, and they have no data. A school like Middlebury, we can call up and say, you know, Johnny has a 1200, should he submit it? And they're going to say, probably not, because our middle 50% is such and such. The schools that are doing this for the first time, they're going to need to make these guesses, and they're going to want to lock kids up right away in that early decision. So I could not agree more.
So sort of dovetailing with that, there's a question about, you know, flexibility on deadlines. Have you heard anything from schools that are maybe saying no? So the deadlines will still be, you know, November, December for.
There's always
JP. I think that question I don't know why that question was asked, but my guess is the question was asked because we heard of a lot of schools pushing back the May 1st date of when the class of 2020 had to go to say, I'm going to X. They pushed it back to June. That was purely because we were in the height of COVID in May. The deadlines are going to be just the same next year. I would be shocked if they change.
The only thing I'd add to that, 2 points. One, there are, and this is non-COVID, like Babson, Slade and I were talking about this morning. It seems like every year Babson is in November. I want to say they're like November 5th. They're a weird deadline. And then on November 5th, they come out at midnight and say, oh, we've extended it to November 15th. So that's always a possibility, but it's not, I don't foresee that being something that's
not going to be an overall.
It's not going to be an overarching thing. The other thing I would say, and Slade referenced the deposit deadlines changing, that's something I think you can expect to see not necessarily change as drastically as we saw this year, but because of there's a whole antitrust lawsuit that's recently been passed against all of the colleges that are part of NACAC, which is college counselors and the college counselors and the college admissions party, I guess. They're the ones who have the rules about early decision, about early action, about early decision too, and they're the ones who came up with this very arbitrary May 1st deadline. That has been since basically, for lack of a better term, abolished. And what you're going to see over the next few years is more and more schools being allowed to say, I know this kid deposited at school X. Well, I really want him, and here's some more money. So colleges are very scared about that. It's a little bit of, Slade might have used this term earlier, but it's a little bit of the wild, wild west out there heading into deposit season now because there's this big antitrust lawsuit now. So that's something I could see continuing to move forward in a similar fashion. And that's a complete advantage. There's a student, not a Trinity-Pawling student, but there's an NYU's recent admit who was just offered a full pay off the wait list. That a lot of it's because of this, a full financial aid package off the wait list. And a lot of it, I personally think, is because of these new rules that basically these gentlemen's agreements between the colleges, we're not going to touch any of your students after May 1st, are happening. So it's purely to the advantage of everyone on this call now. You're much more marketable and can be recruited.
Yeah. So you had mentioned about to our underclassmen and our new juniors that the time frame, your conversations start in December with our fantastic Junior Parents Day. For the postgraduates, we do obviously have them on the line. What is their process, and when does it start, and when do they first get contacted by the two of you?
Slade, can I take this one?
You got it.
So I only ask because I work with most of our PGs. We'll start really in kind of mid to late July. Slade and I will reach out. We'll do some virtual calls with the PGs. If parents want to hop on, we're all ears. And that's just really doing what we did with all of the juniors back in the spring, which is build that initial college list, talk about what's our test taking strategy. PGs that are athletes, that's starting those conversations of what are those two lists I was referring to looking like? Where do you just want to go to school as a kid? And then what schools have you been contacted by? What schools are you interested in? And building those two lists. Once we get back in September, the PGs and, the two of us might call PGs specifically, 5 times throughout the year. They're just rolled right into the senior class. There's not, they're going to senior class meetings. Now we're getting away from the college stuff, but the seniors and the PGs are doing the same exact thing once we come in September. So the only difference really is we're ushering them in July rather than back in, April and May, like our returning seniors did.
And do this. Can I interject before you go to the next question?
No, same question. Just an add-on. But you can answer it. And does the college office have anything to do with the classes that PGs are taking? Is it something that happens with you all in July? Is there another process that goes with that?
The selection of the classes for the postgraduate actually goes through our dean of studies through Dave Karate's office. Dave Karate sits right across the hall from me, and he will constantly be buzzing either Scott or myself saying, here's this new guy, Jimmy. He's a PG. He took this class. Should he take X or should he take Y? We will give the college what's best for the college transcript answer. But just because the way we do it, and it's worked very well, that conversation should be between the family and Dave Karate right now. And then the schedule that Dave gives an incoming postgraduate, Dave's taken into account what's going to look good for the colleges because we've had this conversation. What I wanted to add to Scott's point, because we're going to reach out to all the postgraduates later in June, early July, we start reaching out. There's 2 other things we reach out for. One, we want to start you on your essay, to start generating your Common App essay, because once September comes, the fall hits, it's time to apply. So we want to use the summer to work for an essay. And unlike, and this is a terrible thing to say, but it's true, unlike many, many public schools, we work in the summer. We're here. If you send me an essay, in fact, I know we got somebody who's on the line. I just sent his essay back yesterday. It's game time. And postgraduate, it's game time. So you can start working on the essay, brainstorming with us. We'll help you get it going. We'll help you edit it. We're here to help you. The second thing is teacher recommendations if you're a postgraduate. And this is important. If you have a teacher at your old school where you just graduated from who you are very, very close with, ask them if they would write a teacher recommendation letter for you. You can only do that for one. Your second letter is going to come from a Trinity-Pawling faculty member. And I realize just me saying that just scared the bejesus out of some of you guys out there watching this. Relax. It will be fine. We have some teachers who work with a lot of postgraduates, and they are excellent at getting these letters written well, because they'll make a point of getting to know you quickly. But you can get one from your old school. So when you come in September, tell Mr. Harf or tell me who that person is, and we'll get them into the system. But you are going to have a Trinity-Pawling teacher rec as well.
All right, we have another interesting question. This must be coming from an underclassman on the call, but going back to the elephant in the room and the gap year issue, do you feel like this is going to be a multi-year issue, and will it potentially affect the classes of 2022 and 2023?
That's a great question. If a vaccine is found for COVID, or if a cure where if you get COVID, you're not going to die, and we can kind of go back to the normal game plan, it's going to go back, I think, to the old system. I think this elephant has a big banner on its side saying 2021.
The gap year issue, from a college perspective, certain colleges are great about supporting a gap year. Most of them, if they're going to support a gap year, you got to have a plan, though. And a lot of these people who are asking for kids who are asking for gap years now are just saying, the basic rationale for the gap year is, I don't want to start class potentially online. As soon as that goes away, to Slade's point, the gap years, kids are always going to take gap years. But it's not going to be at the huge numbers that we're seeing this year.
The other thing that's going to happen is a lot of the kids who are taking gap years, they're going to reapply to other schools next year too. So just because you've put off Colgate for a year doesn't mean you can't go and reapply to, Harvard next year. So, it's an elephant. This is a weird year.
So a question about, and this is actually more coming from me, but I don't know, do public high schools, do parochial schools, do they all use Naviance, or is Naviance something that, will our PGs and juniors know Naviance, or just depends?
Some will, some.
Could you describe what Naviance is, please?
Yeah, so Naviance is what we use on the family side of things. You can do tons and tons of college research on there. Every university in the United States, and then most of the ones out if you're looking at schools in Canada, if you're looking at schools in the UK, if you're, international schools, they all have a profile that's housed in Naviance, but also links right to their direct admissions page. So you can do lots and lots of surface level research there. It also houses a lot of our historical data in terms of test scores, GPAs of Trinity-Pawling students who've applied to those schools. So we can go to Harvard, we can see every Trinity-Pawling student, or families can see a scattergram of every Trinity-Pawling student with their SAT score or ACT score and their GPA, and whether that, we don't see who it is, but whether that data point got in or not. So you have a good starting point of, my test score, I have a 28 and a 92 GPA. Well, I look pretty good at this school. I don't look so great at this school. That's just Trinity-Pawling data, so it's a little bit skewed. The other tool from the student side of things is that's where they build their initial and final college lists, because what Naviance also does, and forgive me if I didn't explain this before, it's just a website that our kids have a profile with. So they can access it anywhere as long as they have internet access. But it links to the Common App. So the other thing that Slade and I are constantly doing all fall is sending out the teacher recs that Slade already mentioned. Your transcript goes out that way. Your counselor letter that the two of us write goes out that way, and goes directly to the colleges and links right to your comment. So it's kind of this all-encompassing college search tool. A lot of juniors, I'd expect, are somewhat familiar with it. And PGs, some career search and career builder type stuff in it. And then there's some other options. If you haven't used it before, it's an incredibly intuitive tool, and it's something that the two of us are more than happy to jump on and help you get started. Slade, when will the PGs have access to their Naviance profile?
As soon as they are enrolled in the school, I put them into Naviance, and I will. The trick is we got to get them to sign the consent form for the computer agreement form, but we'll have a Naviance account within a week after they enroll.
So another question that just came in about the gap year situation. Do schools agree to hold your spot? Just out of
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The way a gap year works is you say to the school, boy, I'm just not quite ready to go next year. Could I go the following fall? And they'll say yes. To Scott's point, until pandemic hit, they say, well, what is it you plan to do? And you say, oh, I'm going to be an intern for my Uncle Louie, who owns a auto body shop. Okay, great. Go work for Uncle Louie for a year, get your head together, and then come join us the following year. This year, because of pandemic, all you had to do is say, I just want a gap year. I don't want to go to class on Zoom. Okay, that's fine. That, there are going to be a lot of bored kids from the class of 2020 in September, October, November, because they took the damn gap year. And this is an interesting point. You heard it here first. I think a lot of those kids who take the gap year, if the pandemic gets under control, and I'm feeling more and more optimistic with the testing and the schools are saying they're going to be open, I think you're going to have a lot of those gap year kids bail on the gap year in January, which is fine. The colleges will take them in a heartbeat because they've got empty rooms right now. Right. And every kid who jumps out early of the gap year and takes a January spot opens up a spot for the 2021 kids. So if I was to, if you believe in prayer, tonight's the night to do a prayer that the pandemic goes away and the gap year kids start jumping back into school because they're bored.
Right, because that happens a lot anyway, right? With January admits, right?
Right, but some schools don't play the January admissions game. But this year, all bets are off. You can go to any school in January now if you want to. Right. So it's the wild, wild west.
Yeah. So a question about course selection, which I know, as you said, obviously lives with Mr. Karate in the academic office, but just as knowing that you are in those conversations for repeat juniors, really for anybody, but specifically juniors and PGs, what's Mr. Karate really looking at? Is he looking at the test scores that were submitted? Is he looking at recommendations? Is he looking at just what they took, or all of it?
It's all of it. He wants to, the first thing is you want to make sure that we set our students up for success. Okay. So you may have a postgraduate who is not taking lots of AP classes, and the reason he's at the school is to get that extra year of maturity, maybe play a sport. And we want to have him get really, really good grades. Conversely, we're going to have some postgraduates who really did very, very well at their old high school. And if they were to just take the regular classes at TP, it would almost be like flatlining for them. And they got to take the APs. They've got to take a full freshman year curriculum, basically. So this is good news for you, for those listening tonight. It is an individual, no two kids are alike process that Dave Karate goes through. And you raised some good points, JP. He's taking into account test scores, recommendations that come in on the applications. What's the student's interest? If you have a passion, what credits do they need to cover that they may be missing? So there's lots of variables. I applaud Dave Karate. It's a tough job, and I would say 95% of the time he's spot on. But if you're that 5% and you get a schedule that you're like, this just doesn't feel right, email him, call him. Nothing's set in stone.
Exactly. And that's something that I was actually just going to say in regards to those who are new to the school this coming September. If you are enrolled, you probably already received your schedule. And Mr. Karate, just like Mr. Slade said, worked pretty hard and putting those together, and with a lot of different samples. And so, but, if there's something, because there could be that shift in passion that we've been talking about with SIPs. So if you took a theater class freshman year and you're feeling like, you know what, I'm in a new environment, I want to get back to that, and he didn't quite see that, that's something you talk about. Or an art class or music class or public speaking. There are plenty of electives that we have, but the art of choosing a course load for a student, Mr. Karate has been doing it for a long time, so he's got many reasons for doing what he does, but he's very much open to conversations.
Can I also suggest, if you feel you're in that 5% club and you need to adjust your schedule, this is for if you're under the age of 25, you make the phone call. If you're over the age of 25, find somebody in your household who's under 25 to make the phone call. This moms, don't make this phone call. This is a great self-advocacy process. Mr. Karate, he's a very nice guy. It's a good chance to get out in front of it and meet him, because then in the fall, if it's not working, you've got a rapport with him from the summer. So, Mom, if you have to be on the call, be on the extension, but don't be the main voice.
Can I jump in really quickly with 2 points?
Yeah.
So, in terms of, this is a little bit off topic, but still on the looking at class selection, specifically for the PGs, I would absolutely echo what both JP and Slade are saying about Mr. Karate knows what he's talking about. So trust him on those core, like English, math, science, social studies courses. Your PG year, you've got to look at it like an investment you're making in yourself. And you've got to look at it as a way to, again, make yourself more marketable to colleges. So we're helping you out with the GCC, with the SIP, with, working through your Common App with you, working through your essay with you. The electives that JP mentioned, public speaking, a lot of the electives in the theater, the music courses, they're really, really good options and most of them are going to be a trimester long, so you're not going to have to take a full year of it if you absolutely end up hating it. But it's a really good opportunity to take it in the fall, get to know some people that you might not have gotten to know when you're new in school. And if you're really struggling with a college essay topic, talking about the first theater class you ever took that's an incredible topic. And it shows this initiative, and it shows the investment that you're making in yourself. The other thing, totally switching gears, this was a question that came in on the chat about back to the Naviance. Anyone who has Naviance at their old school, you're going to get an entirely new account when you come to Trinity-Pawling. So the one that you had at your old school, whether it was a public school or a private school, it'll get lost in cyberspace, you're going to get a new one that's linked directly to your Trinity-Pawling email address.
Your common app will stay alive.
Yeah, your common app actually.
Your common app doesn't die, but unfortunately, and this is not our rule, this is Naviance's rule, your Naviance account will die. That I wish it could carry over, but it can't.
But
Scott, we have one last question that just came in, and then I think unless more come in when we ask.
Well, you got me so fired up, JP.
I know. I'm getting to your fired up part. Don't worry. But and I'm going to read it word for word. But what is the timing for student athletes with regard to applying to college on a regular schedule, or if coach/college interest is shown, then when does the application process start, or is it based on the actual offer? So I know you saw the question, but
it's a multi-part answer. I'm going to tell you what we do first. Every one of our kids, we are going to push, and I can't require it, but I am going to highly suggest that every one of our kids, even if you're, Joey Musa, who is committed to Dartmouth after his sophomore year of high school, he applied early decision because they had it. He applied to 2 or 3 other schools because the Dartmouth coaches can love you, and the Alabama Nick Saban can love you, but unfortunately Nick Saban doesn't send the letter of acceptance, so you still got to get in. Especially at some of these more academically rigorous schools. I want, in the 5% chance that it doesn't work out in the admissions committee, I want our students to have a backup plan. So my goal is that every one of our athletes, whether they're committed to a Division I school, Division II school, Division III school, or they're still weighing their options, that they're submitting at least a few early action, which is the non-binding application that goes out in November. They're submitting at least a few of those. And one thing I do think may increase is there's lots of free early action applications out there. So it's really the only thing you're giving up is one of the 20 slots in your Common App, which we rarely see, sometimes, but rarely see kids use up. So you're getting a backup plan there. You've also got your Common App done. And what I always talk to kids about is if, we had a football player, Cam Tillman, was at Merrimack. Well, Merrimack happened to be on that because I'm pretty sure they're free. They have early action. And he ended up at Merrimack, but it was a really cool conversation when the Merrimack coach came and said in January, Cam, we want to offer you a spot. And Cam showed him his letter of acceptance. It's just another connection to make. In terms of I'm going to pivot away from what Trinity-Pawling does. So I want all our guys applying in November. The Dartmouth and Cornell and the Ivy Leagues, the NESCACs in the Division III, so the Wesleyans, the Colbys, the Bowdens, the Williams, the Dickinsons of the world down in Pennsylvania. The more academically rigorous schools, you're going to have a harder and harder time the later you get in, or the later you send your application in, having that coach back you up. Alabama's a lot different. They have enough pull that 5% chance of not getting in is probably like a 0.05% chance. The earlier you get everything in, the better. Is it, do college coaches, especially the Division I level, have the opportunity or have the pull to get kids in late? Absolutely. But the more you can get done with your application so that when a coach does give you an offer, if, a couple of our basketball players this year just committed and just sent their applications in, so it does happen every year, they did have their Common App stuff. So it was a very quick, we're going to offer you, okay, my application's in, 20 minutes later. The Division III, you're going to have a lot less flexibility. So Division III recruiting really ends in January when all the Division III, unless they're a rolling school, but if they have a January 1 or a February 1 regular decision date, it ends there. Division I is going to be ongoing because it's a business. But I go back, the more we can get done by November, the better.
October.
Yeah.
And I would also say,
I think you said November, but that was your that was your nervous tick.
Yeah.
But I would also say for even non-athletes, if you're coming in as a junior and you have your mindset on something, your experience here at Trinity-Pawling could completely change that something. And so
not only that, JP, but if you came and told me, my something is college X, Scott and I are going to say, well, oh my God, if you like great school, but if you're looking at X, you probably want to look at Y and Z.
Right.
And a lot of times we'll get deer in the headlight responses like, never heard of Y and Z. Well, go check them out, because X, Y, and Z have very common, mission statements.
On that note, the two of us don't want you to decide in November, other than early decision, which I highly suggest doing. For the early actions that we're adding, that's to give you options in April.
Right.
And you have tons of time after you go through all the applications. You have tons of time in the spring to go visit these schools. So it's our goal to give you options if the dream school and early decision and the dream school 2 and early decision 2, if we get to that point, doesn't work out.
Or your dream school might not offer ED.
Right.
So that happens every now and then as well.
Well,
not every school has ED.
One more point. We talked about the Common App rolling over. If guys who are juniors now or are seniors and will be PGs with us have not started their Common App, all of our returners should have. But anyone who's going to be a new senior or a PG in the fall, get in there and start your Common App now. It's all this like very boring stuff, like where did mom go to school, where did dad go to school, how many brothers and sisters do you have? It's going to take you about 2 hours. But if you sit down and get it done now, you're going to save yourself a massive headache when you're coming to a brand new school and you've got these amazing new courses that you're flying through, and Coach Loft screaming at you in the football field in the afternoon. So get in there now. It won't be the same exact application. It'll still say it'll still say for entering fall in 2020. But on August 1st, it'll roll over and it's going to save everything for you. So the more you can get done now, the better.
The other thing, and you very rarely hear me say this, but mom and dad, you actually can help with the boilerplate Common App stuff. John, your son does not have to fill that out. And you can work on the Common App simultaneously on 2 computers, 3 computers. So I've seen families in October on Parents' Weekend where kids are way behind, and I'll throw a kid under a bus saying, look, we can't get Johnny off the mark. I'll go into the library and I'll see mom, dad, and Johnny on 3 computers banging it out. Don't do it that way. It can't happen that way, but you could do it in June and July as a family. Just spend one night. You do it as a night. What year did dad go to college? He's going to know the answer.
Right.
So you just saved yourself a phone call.
Yeah. And that's collegecommonapp.com, something of that.
Commonapp.org.
Commonapp.org.
All right. Before I start to kind of sign off, Slade, Scott, anything else to
for test optional schools, because that list lately has been changing very very often. fairtest.org is a great resource. They're updated basically daily. They may be updated hourly, but they have every school, from the schools that are just doing it for 1 year to the schools that have been doing it for, Middlebury's been doing it for many, many years now.
And if I could add or leave you on this note, as scary as this last 6 months has been, or 4 months, 5 months, I think we're in pretty good shape. We're going to do well. We're going to reach into our relationship bag. We're going to reach into our SIP bag. We have a lot of good things going, and our office is aggressive. So I hope, or I feel confident that 2021 is going to post as good a college list as 2020 did, and that was a fabulous year. We'll be fine.
Awesome. Well, and for those of you who are on the call, the passion that you hear from these 2 gentlemen lives and breathes in person, and even more so. When you get to see tears coming down Mr. Mead's eyes, you've struck a chord. But they they have experience, they have passion for you and your son. So we all know that you're in good hands when it comes to these two gentlemen, and also the teachers that write the recommendations and that are a part of that process. So on behalf of Scott and Slade, do not hesitate to email them. They're actually, both their emails are quite easy. It's sharf and smead at trinitypawling.org. They are willing to answer any questions that you might have. And with regard to this wonderful Pride perspective, a conversation with our community, we will continue to have these throughout the summer. And for those of you on the call that do have an athletic spin, we have a great call coming up in 2 weeks, which is staying on top of your game, a conversation about training and transitioning back to school, but also a recruiting process as well. And we're hoping to get some college coaches that will be a part of that as we move forward. We also have a conversation with school leaders after the 4th of July about the reopening of school. Mr. Taylor is hosting another book club. And just to get that out for you right now, the book is The Book of Joy by the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. And so that's July 22nd. And I won't keep going, but there will be more throughout the year, and you'll receive information about that. But next week is a great one. It's hosted by our retiring art chair of 45 years, Ned Reed, who has been our senior master for quite some time. And he's going to be doing, with his colleagues in the art department, a conversation on creativity and passion. And we're happy to have him still be a part of our community. If you're in Pawling, New York anytime soon, he's opening up an art gallery right in downtown Pawling. So with that, I want to thank you all for joining. It's been a great crowd. And again, if you have questions, let us know. We're happy to help out. And as we always say at the end of these, please stay safe, please stay healthy, and have a great summer. Have a great night.
Thanks, everybody.